Hello, and welcome to this tutorial on setting up SSH tunnels with secure pipes. In this tutorial, I'll be going over the concepts for remote forwards, local forwards, and SOCKS proxies, and how you can go about setting them up with secure pipes. If you need a copy of the software, you can just go to www.opoet.com, that's O-P-O-E-T.com, and download it. Note this is only for Macintosh users, so if you're a Windows user, you're out of luck, and if you're a Linux user, you probably know how to do this already anyway. Okay, so let's get started. In this diagram, you'll see the basic problem that we're trying to solve with remote forwards. On the left, you have a local network that has some resource running on a server A, and then on the right, you have the internet with a client that's trying to get access to that resource. So in the typical way things are set up, this is not possible. So the client on the internet is not able to get into a local network to directly access resources, which is a good thing because you don't want traffic going in there just openly because for security reasons. Of course, you can change this with router configurations or something like that, but using an SSH tunnel, it makes it a lot more flexible. So for example, you can have multiple IP addresses on the internet that forward into this one resource onto the local network without having to set up a new drop from your ISP or whatever. You can use some more flexible resources in the cloud. Okay, and I'll show you how that works right now. So this is how remote SSH forwards solve this problem. Basically, you have to add a server in the cloud called server C in this case. And these are, it's very easy to get a cloud-based server, set it up in about 5 minutes. I prefer to use DigitalOcean actually. They have pre-configured images that all they run is SSH, which is basically all you need to run secure pipes. And they only cost $5 a month, so it's very cheap with a dedicated IP address. So the way this works is the client running or server running secure pipes, which in this case is B, you can see with the little icon on it, it sets up a SSH connection to server C, the cloud server, and that runs on port 22, and that's an outgoing connection from the local network to the internet, which is normally not blocked. SSH on server C will then bind to port 25 and accept connections there. The client can then connect to that port. C will forward the traffic from itself to B, and B can then forward that traffic to a port on the local network and resource on the local network. So maybe it's B itself, or maybe it's A. So in that way, a client can directly connect to port 25 on an internal resource, and it's all handled through the SSH forward going from server C to server B. Okay, so now that we understand the problem, how do we set this up in secure pipes? So we add a new remote forward connection, which is easy to add. You specify a name for the connection, and then the first thing you do is specify the SSH server that you're going to use. So in this case, it's just the one C. So you give a username, you can change the port it runs on, give it a password, and then you specify basically where is it going to forward to. So is it going to be the server itself, which could be server B, or is it going to be server A, and what port is it going on? So either of those work, and then once you start the connection, the C will start forwarding all of those connections from itself to the local network, and that's it. The next type of SSH tunnel is called a local forward. So local forward is similar to a remote forward, except basically in reverse. So on the local network, on the left, you have a client that's trying to reach some resource on the internet on the right, but for some reason, typically this is firewall again, or service provider configuration, the client can't do it. So I illustrate port 25 here because it's most common that service providers will block that because that's where mail runs. So you'll have you don't want spammers or viruses that send out spam to have direct access to send mail onto the internet. So how does SSH Tunnels local forwards solve this? Again, you add a cloud server C on the internet side. what happens is the server B makes, again, a secure connection from itself into the cloud server C on the internet. It binds to port 25 on the local network side, and then the client is able to basically make connections to that port. They're forwarded from B to C, and C, the SSH server in the cloud, can forward that either to another resource on the network or to itself. So in that way you get the magic of having a client talk to port 25 on a server on the internet. So this is really cool. So if you want to send mail through a different server rather than your ISP server or something like that, you can use an SSH tunnel in combination with the cloud server to do that. Maybe the cloud server is running a mail server itself, or maybe it just wants to forward to another mail server that you know on the internet. So that's just one example of an application. So how do you set this up? So similar to the remote forward, you give it a name, you give it the SSH server that you want to use, username, password. You tell it where you want to bind to. So in this case, we want to bind to star, and star means that any client on the internal network can access it. So if you put localhost or 127.0.0.1, that would mean just the B server itself would be able to access it. And then you give it a local bind address. So in this case, we're talking about port 25. One thing to note, if you want to bind to any ports that are less than 1024, you have to have administrator privileges on the machine, and Secure Pipes will take care of that if you want to give the administrator password. The final thing you specify is either server A or server C, an address where you want that traffic to forward to. So once it goes from B to C, where does the traffic go? So in this case, we might want to forward to another server A. Okay, so that's local forwards. The final type of SSH tunnel we're going to talk about are called SOCKS proxies. And SOCKS proxies are very similar to local forwards in that there's a client on the local network and they want to get access to some resource on the internet. So for whatever reason, there's a firewall in between or administrative policy for that network that prevents you from accessing that, so the client can't get to it. And this is quite common in both countries and even corporate environments where they don't want you accessing certain things. So for example, all your web traffic goes through a web proxy and they block all of Facebook, or they block all Twitter or something like that. So you can, if the network has SSH access, then you can use this technique to get around it. And in fact, even if you have a web proxy on your local network, Secure Pipes can be configured to use that to then in turn make an SSH connection to a server, which is kind of a little bit of a more advanced topic. But anyway, this is the way it's set up, similar to a local forward. You have a SSH server on the internet. In this case, again, it's server C. Server B will make a SSH connection from B to C, and then at the same time also bind locally to some port. And in this case, it's port 8080. Then in the client, there's a setting. Since we're using Macs, it's in Network Preferences, and you can configure it to use a SOCKS proxy. So when you configure it to use a SOCKS proxy, you specify the IP address or the host name of the proxy, and then also some port it's running on. So in this case, if you were to set it up, you'd say server B and port 8080. And all the applications that are, quote, SOCKS aware will know that they need to talk to server B first when you make any request for an internet resource. And what will happen is, for example, your web server, when you make a request to www.apple.com, it won't go directly to the internet. It'll go to server B and say, hey, server B, I need the web page for apple.com, which is running on port 80. Server B will send that request to server C, and server C will make that request on its behalf to www.apple.com on port 80. And then in this way, you get the direct collection from the client to the server on port 80. And this works for any SOCKS-aware application, like I mentioned. So mail servers or mail applications are the same. So Apple Mail, if you're using IMAP or SMTP, it'll go around. It can use the SOCKS proxy to make that connection. So how do you set this up in Secure Pipes? Well, it's very simple. You add a new SOCKS proxy. You specify the SSH server, you specify the username, password, and then the most important configuration is probably the bind address. So here you either want to specify one of two things, either a star, or you want to specify localhost or 127.0.0.1. And the only difference is whether you want people on your local network to be able to use the SOCKS proxy as well, or if you just want to use it for yourself. And then you specify the port that it's running on. And this is the information that you put into the network preferences configuration of your Mac or your PC, and you can tell so you can tell web browsers or mail applications or whatever where your SOCKS proxy is, and most of them will use the system SOCKS proxy. And it's kind of cool that Secure Pipes will actually set that up for you. So if you check the automatically configure SOCKS proxy in network preferences, when the connections start, it'll set up that SOCKS proxy for you, and then when the connection is down, it will unconfigure it for you so it's not using it anymore. The cool thing about SOCKS proxies are that when you're making requests for these internet resources through server C, the servers on the internet see your IP address of your cloud server, so they don't see where you're actually physically located. So this comes in very useful for services that rely on your physical location to determine whether to deliver the service or not, or also to identify you and kind of get a fix on your position, which is sometimes not desirable for maybe Bitcoin transactions. And one user I know in particular uses this for Netflix. So if you go to Europe and you want to access your Netflix content, a lot of times they'll say it's not available in this country. If you use Secure Pipes using a SOCKS proxy based in New York, you can access your Netflix content while you're on the road. Okay, thanks very much for paying attention. If you have any questions, please email me at sp@opoa.com and I will try to answer you as quickly as possible. Thanks for watching. Bye.